powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. No, Adam Kaplan is not here today. It's Geoff Mosher, a little pinch hit today, as he joins us on another edition of Football at 4. Eagles OTAs, although Jalen Hurts is over at Citizens Bank Park throwing touchdown passes, having a catch with Rob Thompson over there before the Phillies and Tigers game today. But Geoff Mosher is here. I know that a lot of people talking about Jalen Hurts because, it's that time of the year where everybody's doing their rankings. Last year, Jalen Hurts was in the conversation for not being ranked. Now he's number 7 by Chris Sims, who got criticized for his ranking last year, Mosher. I don't think it really matters where Chris Sims puts Jalen Hurts on any list there. But entering this season, it seems like the Eagles have a quarterback that they now believe in a lot more than they did at this time last year.
Oh, 100%. And it's not even a question about belief. Now it's a question about being that guy year in, year out, when the target's on you, when the schedule changes, and he won't have to deal with this year, but, moving forward, the personnel around him will change. In fact, he will have to deal with this a little bit up front with the new right guard situation, but for the most part, the Eagles will be very stellar on the offensive line. The only thing that would really force that test on him, Mike, would be if there was rampant injuries that forced a lot of different guys in spots that he hasn't played with yet. But, Adam and I did a podcast, I think about a week or two ago, where we talked about players we felt who were under the microscope the most, Eagles players going into 2023, and Jalen Hurts was one of mine for a different reason than last year. It's now you're on the other side. Now you've made that money, right? Now I think you and I talked about the whole Joel Embiid effect. The first 3 years, Joel Embiid could do no wrong. Everybody loved him. It didn't matter what kind of shape the team was in because the team was on the way up. He was on the way up, and he was out there balling with people in Center City, and he was a man of the people. And Jalen Hurts has that similar kind of love from the city right now, and everybody thinks he's great and how wonderful it is to have him. But now he just signed the big bucks paycheck, right? And any kind of regression or not as good of a year as last year, and certainly people are going to bring that up. You lose 2 games in a row. Oh, he's not playing as well. He's making all that money. So there's a lot on his shoulders.
Yeah, and, that's the thing, is Jalen Hurts, everything changes for him now. And by all accounts, this first week of OTAs, these new guys that are around him are all kind of recognizing not only, man, this guy's the real deal, it appears that he's actually gotten better.
God, certainly he's gotten better. Yeah, year after year. And, I did see something. It's funny. I saw something on Twitter yesterday. I don't remember one of those kind of metrics or stats-driven Twitter accounts, websites. And he was Jalen Hurts was probably the quarterback who checked it down the least last year, I believe, among all starting quarterbacks with a certain number of attempts. Mm-hmm. And that shouldn't be looked at as a knock, because why check it down when you're completing 68% of your passes to guys like A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith? There's no reason to check it down. But, again, this year, new schedule, different teams. You have better pass-catching running back in DeAndre Swift. Kenneth Gainwell will certainly get at least the opportunity to see more time. And if there's a part of his game that can probably grow, it's that when the defense is doing everything it can to take your vertical threats away and giving you those voided zones on the right and left side, it's not necessarily, I don't call it a check down. It's knowing that the area is there for your running backs where you can hit them quickly and let them get more yards. You see some of the best, whether it's Brady or Rodgers or, Drew Brees was excellent with Kamara at doing that. That's an area of his game.
Well, why do you I've had this discussion a lot with others. I don't know about you so much. Why do you think the Eagles don't use the running backs in the short passing game? Is it because Hurts' propensity to take off and run himself? Like, why throw it to you? I'm just going to take off myself. Is it not a part of their play package? Do they not design it that way? We've also often wondered, why don't they get the running backs more involved in the pass game? Is that just by design?
Yeah, no, I think it was a combination of a few things. I mean, they did I felt like they threw screens last year, but most of them were to Dallas Goedert and occasionally Quez Watkins. It seemed they felt more comfortable with the tight end and the wide receiver screen than the running back screen, which told me they just didn't trust Miles Sanders to catch the ball as much. And then when Kenneth Gainwell was in, they kind of used Kenneth Gainwell as a third down back with a not traditional third round back role because he would get it some other times, but he was certainly their 2-minute back, right? And so he was a guy who they did try to get the ball to him at times. You remember he had a couple of drops. I think he had 2 drops that led to interceptions last year, and he got off to a really rough start last year, the first 6 or 7 games. So I think it's something that they tried to do, but then it just became not as necessary in the offense with how prolific they were able to be downfield at times. There were certain games, Mike, where you remember that Pittsburgh game where it was like Hurts would just throw the ball up and guys were coming down with it left and right. And there was it's funny when Goddard got hurt, right? He missed like 4 or 5 games. There was a stretch there coming out of the bye where they were just lighting teams up, just putting the ball down the field. Pittsburgh, Tennessee, all those games.
Yeah. Well, you could bring in a guy like DeAndre Swift, and the first thing is this guy catches the ball out of the backfield, does big, and then the other side would say, well, the Eagles don't throw the ball to their backs. And you wonder if Brian Johnson's going to try to do more to get those backs involved, or is that kind of, because what did Nick Sirianni basically, hey, now that he signed this contract, we're not going to change his game. We're going to have him do what he does. And what he does is not throw the ball to so is it him not throwing the ball to the backs? Is that him, or is that their offense, a combination?
I guess we'll really find that out because, as you said, DeAndre Swift can catch the ball pretty well. So with him and Gainwell, certainly Jalen Hurts has probably his best assortment of pass-catching running backs that he's had since he's been here. I don't think Nick Sirianni was saying we didn't pay him to change his game because that's a weapon, a running back who can catch the ball. There's no doubt about it. And checking it down can get you a lot of yards based on what the defensive look is going to be. Yeah. And the defensive look could change a lot. And Nick Sirianni did say, if you're just staying the same every year, you're in trouble. You got to change, you got to adapt, you got to evolve. So it's just so few things that you can think of that really need a true evolution or adaptation from last year because they were such a well-oiled machine, but that's kind of the glaring area where they could be better.
Well, and that's one thing we kept, waiting. Like, hey, they got to get the backs more involved. They got to get the back out of the backfield a little bit more involved. We never really saw that materialize. And then you wonder, is that just something that Hurts says, I don't need to throw the ball to you. I'll keep it myself, and I'll pick up the 15 yards. And that's what makes him, such a dynamic weapon as well. Obviously, now, with Swift, Penny, you've got a different assortment of backs than you did last year, where Miles Sanders had a majority. I don't want to say majority, but I mean majority of the time on the field. And he's not a guy that it seemed they ever trusted catching the ball out of the backfield.
Miles Sanders?
Yes.
Yeah, and that was clear. And obviously in the Super Bowl, and there was even a game leading. I was at Chicago. I can't remember late in the season where they tried to, throw it to him in the flat real quick, and it just didn't work out well. He lost his handle on the ball. It wasn't Miles Sanders' thing. It's kind of strange because he never caught the ball much at Penn State. And then when he came to the Eagles as a rookie, Doug Peterson found some way to use him in the passing game that he unlocked, which is really those, H seam passes where he goes right down the right or left hash and catches the ball. And it almost felt like, wow, the Peterson regime really got something out of Miles Sanders that nobody knew he could do. But then, year 2, he started dropping some passes. It was a terrible year in general. And then, that regime ended and the new one started.
Geoff Mosher, Football 4, Inside the Birds podcast. Yeah, I'm interested to see if Brian Johnson kind of adds that element, because really that would be a completion. I mean, they can run the ball because of the offensive line very well. Now, I just say because of the offensive line. Their offensive line is very good. Their running backs seemingly are – you should be excited about the potential of the backs because of their talents, but also because this offensive line is really good. You've got a really good pass-catching tight end, and you obviously have a good pass game. Just adding that element to your offense would be kind of making this a 4-prong offense almost. Tight end, receivers, running game, and then if your backs can also catch the ball out of the backfield, you're just adding another prong to this offense. So that will be an interesting development offensively. Jordan Davis said, he knows that the Eagles are asking more from him and that he's ready for that. I'm kind of interested to get your take on how do you see that grouping, because really the only guy who's seemingly left in the role that he had last year was Fletcher Cox. Hargrave's gone, Sue's gone, Joseph is gone. So how do you see this tackle? He's saying they're expecting more of me. How do you see the tackle position kind of playing out right now?
Well, I see it as a position that it's long on name and draft stock, but also full of question marks. I mean, obviously Jordan Davis, to go from a player who played maybe 10 snaps a game when he was healthy last year to, I don't know what the expectation that he would be able to play this year. Is it 30 snaps a game? Is it 35? I mean, that's still 50% of a game, right? Which would be a huge jump for him and be the most snaps that he's ever played. And to do that, he would have to be, so much more conditioned this year than last year, which I'm sure he's worked on all offseason. And we've gotten great reports about him being in good shape and his weight is right. And that's half the battle right there. But you and I know as well as anyone, until you get out there and start doing it day after day, right? That's when we'll become believers that he can play that position. And he even acknowledged that himself. He has to go out there and do that.
So I guess with a new coordinator, it might be hard to answer this, but we think the coordinator might have a lot of the same looks. Mm-hmm. Is Jordan Davis essentially replacing Joseph? Do they want him to kind of have that type of role in this defense?
Oh, yeah. Of course. I mean, Jordan Davis is about as archetype as a nose tackle as there is. He's 340 pounds, 300, or around there. He is a physical. He's just a complete, unbelievable athlete, right? So maybe I'm sure when the Eagles drafted him and they looked 3 years down the road, they felt that athleticism would translate to him moving in a 4-man rush to the 3 technique position, which a Fletcher Cox would play or a Javon Hargrave would play, and be able to, if not rush the passer the way those guys do, at least be able to collapse a pocket so that guys like Reddick and Cox and Graham and whoever could feast on a one-on-one matchup. I'm sure that's what they imagined. They got nothing close to that last year, but I don't know if they expected even year one for him to be able to do that. But that's part of the 2 kind of pronged role that he's got to be. He's got to be the natural nose tackle in a 5-man front that they drafted him to be. And then it would be quite nice if he was also able to play a little bit of a 3 technique in a pass rush.
Okay, so right now, with the guys they have on this roster, who is the guy who's Javon Hargrave? Who are they looking to give that type of?
That would be Jalen Carter.
Okay, so he gets a lot. I don't know what the snap breakdown is for a player like Hargrave, but they think he's out there playing that position essentially.
Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of discovery here.
They hope.
Another guy who, by the way, did not play a ton of snaps at Georgia, so you wonder how much he's conditioned to play at the NFL. But that's why they have Milton Williams and Contavious Street also. But here's another thing, Mike. I think that he can be. He's not a carbon copy of Javon Hargrave. In fact, he may not get as many sacks as Hargrave, but he may be better. He should be better against the run than Hargrave was. We'll have to see what kind of upfield burst he's really. I mean, he had a great upfield burst in college, so it wouldn't shock me if he reaches potential and he was a double-digit sack guy who also play like what Fletcher Cox used to be, 5 or 6 years ago, a guy who can line up, help you stop the run, but stays on the field in the pass rush and helps you rush the passer as well. That's ideally what Jalen Carter becomes at his best.
Right. It is, and I say they're not asking him to be a carbon copy of Hargrave, but just who has that role. So essentially you might be looking at Fletcher, Davis, Carter as the Fletcher, Joseph, Hargrave.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
That's what ideally, that's how you draw it up. I still find it fascinating that there's no backup Jordan Davis right now. I mean, Noah Ellis is there competing. He's a 350-pound space clogger. And maybe, he can make the team. I doubt it because of just how much depth the Eagles have.
How much 5-man fronts do you play? You know what I'm saying? Like, do they?
Well, that was their base defense.
Right. I would say, is that going to be the base defense? Yeah.
It has been for 2 years now. Yeah.
That will be, I think it was Nick Morrow who was talking maybe today or yesterday, who was saying how prepared that he's never been around a coordinator so far who has put them in so many situational things at this stage of where they are in camp. Like, very impressed with the way this defense looks, but I'm interested to see situationally is a five-man front the way they go like they have the last couple of years. Because everybody keeps comparing their defense to what they had because they have similar concepts.
Yeah, and it's become so commonplace now in the NFL to see these teams that are playing these Fangio-style defenses. I mean, it's got to be at least 50 to 60% of the league that's playing some kind of variation of a five-man front and then going to a four-man front in pass rush. So much that in the next podcast, Adam and I are going to do where we draft the NFC East defense. You know how we just did the offense?
Yep.
I don't have, a long time ago you would do defensive tackle, defensive end, linebacker, cornerback, safety, right? Well, I'm dividing it here just for my own, just to get my names ready, into edge, interior defensive line, stack linebacker, which is like a coverage linebacker like N'Kobe or TJ Edwards was, right? Not like Hassan Reddick, who is technically a linebacker but falls under the edge category.
Right.
Cornerback, nickel, safety. Because
so what is Brandon Graham?
I have Brandon Graham as an edge. So an edge is either,
Sweat,
to me,
real quick, it's Sweat.
An edge. An edge.
So Sweat's an edge. Sweat's an
and
edge. Graham. So there's no more defensive ends.
Well, correct. But I mean, I would say there's two types of edge or defensive ends. There's the Josh Sweat, who plays a lot with his hand in the dirt. He also stands up. But then there's Hassan Reddick, who's considered a linebacker, but really is a stand-up rusher who will occasionally drop back. You will very, very, very infrequently see Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat drop into coverage. You may see him stand up, but they're not going to drop into coverage that much. But you'll see them rush the passer from the edge. So edge defender right now is the most, I would say, diverse of the group because they all do a little bit different things, but they line up on the edges.
Yeah. Milton Williams is a what?
He is a three technique, interior defensive line. He is a backup Fletcher Cox.
All right. Because I have high expectations for him.
Well, he's a short-armed guy, so they always, when they drafted him, knew that he'd probably be a rotational defensive end. But the Eagles have done really well throughout their, and so have other teams, but just with having really good rotational interior rusher. Going back to like when Darren Howard, when they signed him in 2006 or 7, as in, he used to be a defensive end with the Saints, and they just moved him inside in the pass rush. He didn't start because they had Trent Cole and they had Javon Curse, I think, at the time, or maybe Juquay Parker or whatever, and they would just move him inside and have him rush. And he got 10 sacks as mostly an interior.
Yeah, well,
rusher.
Last year Williams, I think, had 4 sacks in 20% of the snaps. If his snaps even double to 40%. Does he get himself up to 8 to 9? So I think he's one of them guys who just has, he's a tough guy to define what he is, and that also makes you a tough guy to block sometimes.
Sure. Remember Derek Landry? He had a couple of good years in the wide nine as a reserve defensive tackle who would come in and give you a nice little upfield burst.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to that position, the tackles in which we talked about, because a lot of young talent and older talent. It's a veteran young mix. It's a really, Williams is now going into his 3rd year. You got the two guys, obviously Carter, a rookie, 2nd-year guy, Davis, Williams, a 3rd-year guy, and then you have the older guys. So that's a really interesting position on how they're going to break all that down. Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, InsideTheBirds.com, a quick pinch hit. And just like that, man, we just talked football for 20 minutes. How about it?
Yeah, it's better than talking about all the money and the greed going on today.
Money,
sports.
greed, trades, Trey Turner, homers. Man, come on. Everything's happening right now. It's a hot time. InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN.